The gunshot echoed across the valley, sending a flock of startled birds into the crimson sunset sky, as Penelope Matthews clutched her swollen belly and stumbled toward the abandoned cabin. Blood trickled down her temple where the stagecoach robber had struck her before abandoning her on the desolate trail. Her husband of less than a year lay dead miles back, his pockets emptied, his wedding ring stolen, his dreams of starting a new life in Montana territory with her now scattered like dust in the wind. Penelope gasped as pain rippled through her abdomen. The baby wasn't due for another month, but the trauma of the attack and the miles of desperate walking had taken their toll. She reached the weathered porch just as her knees buckled beneath her. "Help," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself as darkness began to close in around her vision. "Please, someone help us." The last thing she remembered was the sound of heavy boots on wooden planks and strong arms lifting her from the cold ground. Xavier Cole had come to this remote corner of Montana territory to forget his past, not to bring new life into the world. Yet here he was, boiling water and tearing clean strips from his spare shirt as the young woman he'd found collapsed on his porch screamed through another contraction. "You're doing fine," he lied, having absolutely no idea if she was doing fine or not. He'd delivered foals and calves, but never a human baby. "Just breathe, miss." "Penelope," she gasped between contractions. "My name is Penelope Matthews. Miss Matthews, I'm Xavier Cole." "Most folks just call me Xander." He dabbed her forehead with a cool cloth. "Your baby's coming early, but we're going to get through this." Her eyes, the color of summer bluebonnets, filled with tears. "My husband, they killed him. The Blackwell gang, they took everything." Xander's jaw tightened at the mention of the notorious outlaws. "Don't think about that now. Just focus on bringing your little one into the world." Hours passed like years. The small cabin filled with Penelope's cries and Xander's steady encouragements, until finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the cabin's single window, a new sound joined them, the healthy wail of a newborn baby. "It's a girl," Xander announced, wrapping the tiny, red-faced infant in a clean blanket. "A beautiful little girl." Penelope sobbed as he placed the child in her arms. "Hello, my darling. I'm so sorry your father isn't here to meet you." Xander turned away, giving mother and child privacy while he cleaned up. He'd come to this place to escape memories of his own family lost to typhoid 3 years ago, his wife, his 5-year-old son. Now his solitude had been shattered by another tragedy, another family broken. "Mr. Cole," Penelope called weakly, "I don't know how to thank you." He returned to her bedside. "No need for thanks, anyone would have done the same." "No," she whispered, "not anyone. The stagecoach driver left me to die when the robbers were done. He was too afraid they'd come back." Her eyes drifted closed. "We have nothing now, nowhere to go." Xander looked at the exhausted young mother and the tiny infant in her arms. Something stirred in his chest, something he thought had died long ago with Sarah and little James. "You'll stay here until you're strong enough to travel," he said firmly. "Then I'll take you to Helena. There's a women's aid society there that can help you start over." What Xander didn't know as he spoke those words in the spring of 1878 was that his life had just changed forever, and the journey ahead would heal wounds he'd thought would never mend. 3 weeks passed, and Penelope grew stronger each day. Little Hannah, named after Penelope's grandmother, thrived under their combined care. Xander found himself waking before dawn, not to escape his dreams as he once had, but to watch the sunrise with the tiny girl in his arms, giving Penelope a few precious hours of uninterrupted sleep. One evening, as a spring storm lashed against the cabin windows, Penelope sat by the fire nursing Hannah while Xander prepared a simple supper of rabbit stew. "You never told me what brought you out here, so far from everything," she said quietly. Xander's hands stilled on the wooden spoon he was using. "Same as most men, I suppose, looking for a fresh start." "It's more than that," Penelope observed. "You had a family once. I've seen how you hold Hannah, how you know exactly what to do." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the drumming rain on the roof. "I had a wife, Sarah," he finally said, his deep voice rough with emotion. "And a boy, James. Typhoid took them both in '75. I was away driving cattle north when it happened. Didn't even get to say goodbye. Penelope's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Xander, he shrugged, trying to appear unmoved though his heart ached. Been alone ever since, figured it was safer that way. For whom? She asked gently. Their eyes met across the small cabin, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loss, of understanding that went beyond words. The following morning dawned clear and warm. Xander was outside mending the corral fence when he spotted riders approaching 3 men, moving fast. His hand instinctively went to the revolver at his hip. Penelope, he called, backing toward the cabin. Take Hannah and go to the root cellar. Now. She appeared in the doorway, alarm spreading across her face when she saw the approaching men. Without a word, she gathered Hannah and disappeared back inside. Xander positioned himself on the porch, one hand casually resting near his gun. As the riders drew closer, he recognized the lead man, Sheriff Tom Blackwood from Helena, accompanied by 2 deputies. Cole, the sheriff greeted, tipping his hat. Been a while, Sheriff, Xander nodded cautiously. What brings you out this way? Looking for survivors from a stagecoach robbery 3 weeks back. Found the driver in a saloon in Deer Lodge, drunk and telling tales about abandoning a pregnant woman after the Blackwell gang hit them. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You seen anyone matching that description? Before Xander could answer, the cabin door opened and Penelope stepped out, Hannah bundled in her arms. I'm the woman he abandoned, she said, her voice steady despite the fear Xander could see in her eyes. My husband was killed and I was left to die on the trail. Sheriff Blackwood removed his hat. Madam, I'm sorry for your loss. We've been tracking the Blackwell gang for months. They've hit 3 stagecoaches in the territory since winter's end. They took everything we had, Penelope said. Our money, our supplies, even Thomas's wedding ring. We found one of them yesterday, the younger deputy interjected. Shot dead in a dispute over cards in Fort Benton, had several wedding bands in his pocket. Penelope's hand flew to her mouth. Could I see them? The sheriff nodded to the deputy, who produced a small cloth pouch. Penelope handed Hannah to Xander and with trembling fingers opened the pouch and sifted through several gold bands until she found one with an inscription. This was his, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. To TM, my eternal love, PM. Sheriff Blackwood cleared his throat. Madam, I'll need you to come to Helena to give a statement. We're closing in on the rest of the gang, and your testimony could help put them away. Xander stepped forward. She just had a baby, Sheriff. She's in no condition to travel. We can wait a few days, Blackwood conceded. But not too long. These men need to be brought to justice before they hurt anyone else. After the sheriff and his deputies departed with promises to return in a week, Penelope sat by the fire turning Thomas's ring in her fingers. I should feel something knowing one of his killers is dead, she said quietly, but I just feel empty. Xander sat beside her, Hannah sleeping peacefully in his arms. Revenge doesn't fill the holes they leave behind. I learned that the hard way. She looked up at him. What do you mean? He sighed, memories he'd tried to bury resurfacing. After Sarah and James died, I tracked down the doctor who was supposed to treat them but was too drunk to come when called. I nearly beat him to death outside a saloon in Cheyenne, would have killed him if some cowboys hadn't pulled me off. He shook his head, didn't bring them back, just gave me more nightmares. Penelope reached out and placed her hand over his. What will happen when we go to Helena, after I give my statement? Xander hadn't allowed himself to think about it. These weeks with Penelope and Hannah had awakened something in him he'd thought was long dead hope, perhaps, or the dangerous possibility of caring again. You could start a new life there, he said carefully. Towns are always looking for teachers, and you mentioned you taught school back east. And you, she asked, her eyes searching his. Will you go back to being alone out here? The question hung between them like a physical thing. Xander looked down at Hannah, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger even in sleep. I don't know, he admitted. I've gotten used to having you both around. The week passed too quickly. Xander found himself inventing reasons to delay their departure, a loose wheel on the wagon, a storm brewing on the horizon, a bear spotted too close to the trail. But eventually, there were no more excuses to be made. On the morning they were to leave for Helena, Xander found Penelope standing on the porch, Hannah in her arms, gazing out at the mountains that rose purple and majestic in the distance. "It's beautiful here," she said without turning. "I can see why you chose it." "It was just a place to hide," he replied, coming to stand beside her. "Until you two arrived." She turned to him then, her face solemn. "I've been thinking about what happens after Helena. I have no family left, Xander. My parents died years ago. Thomas was all I had, and now—" She glanced down at Hannah. "Now it's just us. You're a strong woman, Penelope. You'll make a good life for her." "I know I can," she said with quiet determination. "But I've also learned that being strong doesn't mean you have to be alone." Her eyes met his. "Hannah needs a father." Xander's heart pounded in his chest. "Penelope, I'm not asking for declarations or promises," she interrupted. "I'm just asking you to consider coming with us. Not out of obligation, but because in these few weeks, we've become something like a family, haven't we?" Before he could answer, hoofbeats sounded in the distance. Sheriff Blackwood and his deputies had returned. The journey to Helena took 2 days, camping one night under the stars. Penelope rode in the wagon with Hannah while Xander drove, the sheriff and deputies flanking them as protection against any encounter with the remaining Blackwell gang members. That night, after the others had fallen asleep, Xander and Penelope sat by the campfire, speaking in hushed tones. "What will you do after this is over?" she asked, watching the flames dance. He poked at the fire with a stick. "Never gave much thought to the future after Sarah and James died, just lived day to day. And now—" Xander looked at her, this woman who had shown such courage in the face of devastating loss. "Now I'm thinking maybe the future doesn't have to be something to fear." She smiled, the firelight casting a warm glow on her face. "That's a start." Helena was larger and more bustling than Penelope had imagined. Streets lined with businesses, a proper courthouse, churches with tall steeples, and homes that spoke of prosperity. After months of travel and tragedy, the town's liveliness was overwhelming. Sheriff Blackwood escorted them to a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Holloway, who cooed over Hannah and showed Penelope to a clean, comfortable room. "The Ladies' Aid Society meets tomorrow," Mrs. Holloway informed her. "They'll want to help you, dear. Such a tragedy, losing your husband that way." When they were alone, Xander awkwardly handed Penelope a small pouch of coins. "It's not much, but it should see you through until you find work." Her eyes widened. "Xander, I can't take your money, please," he insisted. "For Hannah." She accepted the pouch with reluctance. "Where will you stay?" "Sheriff's offered me a bunk at the jail until I figure things out." He shifted uncomfortably. "I should go. You need rest after the journey. Will you come tomorrow, before I have to give my statement?" He nodded. First thing in the morning. But morning came, and Xander didn't appear. Penelope waited anxiously, feeding and changing Hannah, pacing the small room until Mrs. Holloway came to escort her to the courthouse. The questioning was grueling. Penelope recounted every detail of the robbery, describing each of the 5 men who had attacked the stagecoach, killed Thomas, and left her for dead. When she finished, she was emotionally exhausted. "You've been very brave, Mrs. Matthews," the prosecutor told her. "Your testimony will help us bring these men to justice. Has there been any sign of Mr. Cole?" she asked Sheriff Blackwood as they left the courthouse. The sheriff exchanged glances with his deputy. "Cole rode out at dawn, left this for you." He handed her a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, Penelope opened it to find a brief note written in a rough hand. "Penelope, I'm no good at goodbyes. You and Hannah deserve better than a broken man. The money is yours to keep. Start fresh." Tears blurred her vision. He was gone just like that. She'd foolishly believed they were building something together, but he'd chosen solitude over the possibility of a new family. "Did he say where he was going?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "No, madam. Cole's always been a private sort, been that way since he lost his family." Penelope straightened her shoulders. "I see. Thank you, Sheriff. Is there anything else you need from me?" "Not for now. The Ladies' Aid Society is expecting you at the church. They'll help get you settled." The women of Helena were kind and generous, offering Penelope clothes for herself and Hannah, a position as a teacher's assistant at the town school, and a small apartment above the milliner's shop once she was established. She accepted their help with gratitude, but each night she found herself staring out the window toward the mountains, wondering where Xander had gone and why he'd left without a proper goodbye. A month passed. Penelope settled into a routine, caring for Hannah, assisting at the school and slowly rebuilding her life. She made friends among the townswomen, particularly with Ruth Simmons, the young schoolteacher who had taken her under her wing. "You're a natural with the children," Ruth told her one afternoon as they watched the students file out after lessons. "You should apply for the second teacher position. The town council approved the funding yesterday." Penelope smiled, bouncing Hannah on her hip. "I'd like that. It feels good to be teaching again. And it comes with the cottage behind the school," Ruth added with a knowing look. "More room for you and Hannah than that tiny apartment." That evening, Penelope was preparing Hannah's bath when a knock came at her door. Expecting Ruth with some papers about the teaching position, she was stunned to find Sheriff Blackwood standing there, his expression grave. "Mrs. Matthews, may I come in?" Fear clutched at her heart. "What's happened?" "We caught the rest of the Blackwell gang," he said, stepping inside and removing his hat. "There was a shootout. Most of them are dead, but we captured the leader, Silas Blackwell himself." Relief flooded through her. "That's good news, isn't it?" The sheriff's face remained solemn. Cole was there. Penelope felt the blood drain from her face. "Xander, but how? Why?" "He's been tracking them since he left Helena, found their hideout in the mountains and sent word to me. We might not have caught them without his help." The sheriff hesitated. "He was shot, Mrs. Matthews." Her knees weakened and she sank into a chair. "Is he?" "He's alive, but it's bad. Doctor's with him now at my office." Sheriff Blackwood shifted uncomfortably. "He's been asking for you." Penelope moved in a daze, gathering Hannah and following the sheriff through the darkening streets to his office, where a back room had been converted into a makeshift infirmary. The doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, met them at the door. "He's lost a lot of blood," he informed them quietly. "The bullet missed his heart but punctured his lung. I've done what I can." Penelope handed Hannah to the sheriff's wife, who had arrived to help, and entered the small room. Xander lay on a narrow bed, his face ashen, his breathing labored. Bandages wrapped his chest, a crimson stain spreading slowly across the white cloth. "Xander," she whispered, taking his hand, his eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. "Penelope, you came." "Of course I came." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why did you leave like that? Why did you go after them alone?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not good at goodbyes, and they needed to pay for what they did to Thomas, to you." "I didn't want revenge, Xander. I wanted you." His hand tightened weakly around hers. "Wasn't sure I had anything worth offering. Been running so long, didn't know how to stay." "And now, are you still running?" His eyes held hers. "No, now I'm fighting to stay." For 3 days, Penelope barely left Xander's side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, helping the doctor change his bandages, spooning broth between his pale lips. Hannah became the darling of the sheriff's office, passed among deputies and their wives who took turns caring for her while Penelope maintained her vigil. On the 4th morning, Xander's fever broke. The doctor pronounced him out of immediate danger, though recovery would be slow and painful. "You need proper rest and care," the doctor told him. "Somewhere quiet, not in the back of a sheriff's office." "He can come with us," Penelope said without hesitation. "The school board gave me the teacher's cottage yesterday. There's plenty of room." Xander's eyes found hers. "Penelope, you don't have to. I'm not doing this out of obligation," she interrupted, echoing the words she'd spoken to him on the porch of his cabin. "I'm doing it because I care about you, because Hannah and I both need you." 2 weeks later, Xander was strong enough to be moved to the cottage. It was a simple structure, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a small parlor with a stone fireplace, but to Penelope, it felt like a palace compared to the cramped apartment she'd been sharing with Hannah. As summer turned to autumn, Xander's strength returned. He began helping around the cottage, then around the schoolyard, repairing fences, chopping wood for winter, and eventually assisting the town's aging blacksmith, who was grateful for the extra hands. One crisp October evening, As they sat on the cottage porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hannah sleeping peacefully in her cradle beside them, Xander took Penelope's hand. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice carrying that slight roughness she'd come to love. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I've been alone a long time, Penelope. Thought that's how it had to be after losing Sarah and James, but these past months with you and Hannah." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You've shown me there can be love after loss, that the heart can heal." Penelope's own heart raced. "Xander, let me finish before I lose my nerve," he said, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "I know Hannah isn't mine by blood, but I've come to love her as if she were, and you." His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, met hers. "I love you, Penelope Matthews. I think I started falling for you that first morning when you held Hannah in your arms by the fire in my cabin." Tears of joy sprang to her eyes. "I love you too, Xander. I think I have since you delivered Hannah and promised to keep us safe." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold band not Thomas's, which Penelope kept in a special box along with his portrait, but a new one, simple and bright. "I'm not asking you to forget Thomas," he said solemnly. "He'll always be Hannah's father, but if you'll have me, I'd like to be her pa and your husband." Penelope looked at the sleeping infant, then back at the man before her, this man who had saved them both in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church, with Hannah, now 8 months old and attempting her first wobbly steps, watching from Ruth's arms. The entire town attended, having embraced the young widow and the taciturn cowboy turned blacksmith's apprentice as their own. After the simple ceremony and celebration, they returned to their cottage, now decorated with pine boughs and candles for the holiday. Xander built up the fire while Penelope put Hannah to bed in what had been his room, but would now become the nursery proper. When she returned to the parlor, she found him standing by the fire, gazing into the flames. "What are you thinking about, husband?" she asked, the word new and wonderful on her tongue. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "About how life takes unexpected turns. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over when I lost my family, and now here I am, starting anew." She went to him and he took her hands in his, drawing her close. "I was thinking about what you said that night at my cabin," he continued, "about Hannah needing a father." "She has one now," Penelope said softly. "The best man I know." Xander touched her cheek gently. "What would you think about giving her a brother or sister someday, not to replace what we've lost, but to add to what we've found?" Penelope's heart swelled with love. "I think that would be wonderful." He drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a tender kiss that held the promise of their future together. When they parted, he gazed down at her, his expression solemn yet filled with hope. "I'll raise them right beside you," the cowboy said as he took her hand by the fire. "All of them, for as long as I live." As winter deepened, the little family settled into a rhythm of domestic happiness that neither Penelope nor Xander had dared hope for after their respective losses. The town of Helena embraced them fully, Xander's skill with horses and metal making him indispensable at the blacksmith's forge, while Penelope's gentle but firm teaching style won her the respect of students and parents alike. Hannah thrived under their combined love and care, growing from a wobbly infant into a determined toddler with Penelope's blue eyes and what Xander swore was Thomas's stubborn chin, though he'd never met the man. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, melting the deep snows and bringing color back to the valley. On a warm Sunday in April 1879, after church services, the family took their usual walk by the creek that ran behind the schoolhouse. Hannah toddled ahead, chasing butterflies and picking dandelions with single-minded focus. "She's fearless," Xander observed with pride as the little girl scaled a small boulder. "Going to be a handful when she gets older." Penelope squeezed his hand. "Like her father, then?" He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. They had agreed early in their marriage that Thomas would always be acknowledged as Hannah's true father, his memory honored rather than erased. "Both her fathers," Penelope clarified with a gentle smile. "Thomas gave her life, but you're teaching her how to live it." Xander's throat tightened with emotion, He pulled Penelope close, kissing the top of her head. "I never thought I'd have this again," he murmured. "A family, a purpose beyond just surviving." She looked up at him, her expression suddenly hesitant. "Do you ever regret it, tying yourself to a ready-made family instead of starting fresh?" "Never," he said firmly. "You and Hannah aren't some compromise or second choice, Penelope. You're the miracle I wasn't looking for." She bit her lip, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm glad you feel that way because our family is about to get a little larger." It took a moment for her words to register. When they did, Xander's eyes widened in shock, then joy. "You mean?" "Yes," she confirmed, her smile radiant. "Doctor Phillips confirmed it yesterday. Late September, he thinks." Xander let out a whoop that startled a nearby flock of birds into flight. He lifted Penelope off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. Hannah came running back to see what the commotion was about, her small fists filled with wildflowers. "Mama, laugh," she declared, offering her flowers as if they were the cause of the celebration. Xander knelt down to her level. "Hannah, how would you like to be a big sister?" The toddler's brow furrowed in confusion. "Big, you'll have a little brother or sister to help take care of," Penelope explained, joining them on the grass. "Someone to play with and teach things to." Hannah considered this information with all the gravity a 20-month-old could muster before breaking into a toothy grin. "Yes, Hannah big." That night after Hannah was asleep, Xander and Penelope sat on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. The spring air was cool but not cold, fragrant with apple blossoms from the small orchard behind the cottage. "I've been thinking," Xander said, his fingers absently stroking her arm. "The cottage is fine for now, but with another child coming, it will be a bit cramped," Penelope agreed. "But we'll manage," he shook his head. "I don't want us to just manage. I want to build you a proper home with room for the children to grow." She sat up to look at him. "But where? The plots in town are expensive and your salary at the forge not in town," he interrupted. "I've been talking with Sheriff Blackwood. My old cabin and the land around it, I never sold it, just walked away. The property's still mine. It's good land, Penelope. Rich soil, plenty of water from the creek, space for a garden and animals." Penelope's eyes widened. "You want to go back?" "But what about my teaching position? And your work with Mr. Gunderson?" "It's only 15 miles from town, close enough to ride in regularly. You could still teach, maybe not every day, but the school board already mentioned they might need someone for the older students next year. And I've learned enough from Gunderson to set up my own forge." His eyes held hers, earnest and hopeful. "We could have the best of both worlds, the community here and the freedom of our own place." Penelope thought of the cabin where Hannah had been born, where she and Xander had first begun to heal each other's wounded hearts. There was something poetic about returning there to continue their story. "When would we start?" she asked. His face lit up with the realization that she was agreeing. "I thought after the school term ends in June. That gives us 3 months to prepare the cabin and build an addition before the baby comes." As Xander spoke of his plans, a larger kitchen, a proper bedroom for Hannah, a small forge beside the barn, Penelope felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. This was what Thomas had wanted for her when they'd set out for Montana Territory, a home, a family, a future filled with purpose and love. Word spread quickly through Helena about the Cole family's plans. What might have been a monumental task for one man and his pregnant wife became a community endeavor. On consecutive weekends in June, after the school term ended, wagons filled with lumber, tools, and willing hands made the journey to Xander's old cabin. Men from town helped raise the walls of the addition, while their wives and children cleared the overgrown garden and repaired fences. Ruth Simmons organized a quilting circle to ensure the growing family would have warm bedding for the coming winter. Sheriff Blackwood and his deputies constructed a new, larger corral and helped Xander select 2 milk cows and a small flock of chickens from the livestock auction. By mid-July, the renovated cabin had been transformed into a proper homestead. The original structure now served as the main living area and kitchen, with a new wing containing 3 bedrooms and a small washroom. Xander's forge stood ready beside the expanded barn, and Penelope's garden was already producing early vegetables. On their first night in their new home, after the last of their friends had departed and Hannah was asleep in her new room, Xander and Penelope stood on the porch, his arm around her waist, her head against his shoulder. "It's perfect," she whispered, looking out at the valley bathed in moonlight. "Better than I imagined. There's still work to be done," he cautioned. "The roof over the main room needs reinforcement before winter, and I want to dig a proper well closer to the house so you don't have to haul water from the creek." She smiled up at him. "I wasn't talking about the house, Xander. I meant all of it, our life together, this land, our family." She took his hand and placed it on her rounded belly where their child grew stronger each day. "This is the dream I didn't dare to hope for after Thomas died." Xander's throat tightened with emotion. "I know what you mean. After Sarah and James, I thought that part of my life was over." He kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for showing me it was just beginning." August passed in a haze of productive activity. Xander split his time between establishing his blacksmithing business, shoeing horses, and repairing equipment for neighboring homesteads, and preparing the farm for winter. Penelope preserved the garden's bounty, putting up jars of vegetables and fruits while teaching Hannah her letters and numbers. On the first day of September, as they sat down to supper, a knock came at the door. Xander opened it to find Sheriff Blackwood dismounting from his horse, his expression grave. "Sheriff," Xander greeted him, "what brings you out this way?" "Business, I'm afraid," Blackwood replied, removing his hat as he entered. "Evening, Mrs. Cole, little Miss Hannah." Penelope rose to her feet, one hand supporting her back. "Has something happened in town?" The sheriff accepted the coffee she offered. "Not in town. Up north, near the Canadian border. Silas Blackwell escaped during prisoner transfer last week." Xander's face hardened. "I thought he was headed to federal prison in Wyoming Territory." "He was, somehow got free of his chains and killed 2 marshals." Blackwood's eyes moved between them. "There's more. Before he escaped, he was heard making threats against the witnesses who put him away. Your name came up specifically, Mrs. Cole." Penelope paled, instinctively moving closer to Hannah. "Surely he wouldn't. We don't think he knows where you are," Blackwood assured her. "Records show you living in town, not out here. But I wanted to warn you both, just in case. I've deputized extra men to patrol the roads around Helena." After the sheriff departed, promising to send a deputy to check on them every few days, Xander double-checked the locks on doors and windows. Penelope put Hannah to bed with extra stories and songs, trying to maintain normalcy despite the fear that had taken root in her heart. When she came to their bedroom, she found Xander cleaning his rifle, his face set in grim determination. "Do you think he'll come here?" she asked, easing herself onto the edge of the bed. Xander looked up, his expression softening when he saw her concern. "No, Blackwell's likely halfway to Mexico by now, but I'll be ready if he does." She nodded, trying to draw strength from his certainty. "The baby's been restless today." "I think he knows I'm worried." Setting aside the rifle, Xander came to sit beside her, placing his large hand on her belly. "He is it. You sound pretty sure." "Just a feeling," she admitted with a small smile. "Hannah was calm inside me. This one seems to be practicing for a rodeo." As if in response, the baby kicked vigorously against Xander's palm. His face lit up with wonder. "Strong little fella." "Like his father," Penelope said, covering his hand with hers. That night, as a thunderstorm rolled across the valley, Penelope woke to sharp, insistent pain. She gasped, clutching her abdomen as lightning illuminated the bedroom. "Xander," she whispered urgently, shaking his shoulder. "The baby's coming." He was instantly alert. "Now, but it's too early." "Only by a few weeks," she assured him, though concern shadowed her voice. "Babies come when they're ready, not when we expect them." Xander sprang into action, lighting lamps and stoking the fire while Penelope breathed through the contractions. They had planned for the doctor to attend the birth, but with the storm raging and town 15 miles away, they would have to manage alone just as they had with Hannah's birth. "I'll get Ruth," Xander decided, pulling on his boots. Ruth Simmons and her husband had purchased the neighboring property that summer, making her the closest neighbor at just under a mile away. "She's helped deliver babies before." "Hurry," Penelope urged as another contraction seized her, "and check on Hannah." The storm intensified as Xander rode through the darkness, rain lashing his face, thunder drowning the sound of his horse's hooves. Ruth and her husband were already awake, alarmed by his arrival in such conditions. "Go back to Penelope," Ruth instructed after hearing his breathless explanation. "I'll gather my things and follow. John will stay with our children and then ride for the doctor at first light." By the time Xander returned home, soaked to the skin and worried beyond measure, Penelope's labor had progressed rapidly. He found her pacing the bedroom, one hand braced against the wall for support. "Ruth's coming," he told her, helping her back to the bed. "John will fetch the doctor at dawn." "The baby won't wait that long," Penelope gasped, her face contorted with pain. "This one's in a hurry." She was right. By the time Ruth arrived 20 minutes later, Penelope was ready to push. With Ruth's calm guidance and Xander's unwavering support, their son entered the world as the storm reached its crescendo, his lusty cries competing with the thunder that shook the windows. "He's perfect," Ruth declared, placing the swaddled infant in Penelope's arms after cleaning and examining him. Small but strong. Xander stared in awe at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the miniature fingers that curled around his own when he reached out to touch them. "He's beautiful," he whispered, "just like his mother." Penelope looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed various options but hadn't settled on one. Now, gazing at this new life they'd created together, Xander knew. "James," he said softly. "James Thomas Cole." Tears filled Penelope's eyes as she recognized the tribute to both their lost loved ones. "It's perfect." Ruth slipped quietly from the room to check on Hannah, giving the new parents a moment alone with their son. Outside, the storm began to abate, the thunder receding into the distance, the rain gentling from torrential to steady. Xander perched carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Penelope's shoulders, the other hand gently touching James's downy head. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "After losing my first James, I couldn't imagine loving another child. And now," Penelope asked, "now I understand that love isn't finite. It grows to encompass everyone who enters our hearts." He kissed her temple. "You taught me that, Penelope, you and Hannah." The days following James's birth passed in a blur of joy and adjustment. Hannah was fascinated by her tiny brother, constantly wanting to touch his hands and feet to help Penelope change and feed him. Xander took over most of the farm chores, allowing Penelope time to recover and bond with the baby. Dr. Phillips arrived the morning after the birth, pronounced both mother and child healthy, and left them with instructions and congratulations. Ruth stayed for 2 days, helping with Hannah and teaching Penelope how to manage 2 children under 2 years of age. A week after James's arrival, just as life was settling into a new normal, disaster struck. Xander was in the forge, working on horseshoes for a neighboring farmer's team, when he heard Hannah's terrified scream from the direction of the house. He dropped his tools and ran, his heart pounding with fear. He found Penelope at the kitchen table, James nursing at her breast, her face white with shock. Hannah was clinging to her skirts, sobbing. And standing in the doorway, muddy and unkempt but unmistakable from the wanted posters, was Silas Blackwell, a revolver pointed at Penelope's head. "Well, ain't this a touching family scene?" Blackwell drawled, his cold eyes taking in the tableau before him. The pretty widow, all settled with a new husband and another brat. Xander's hand moved imperceptibly toward the knife at his belt. "What do you want, Blackwell?" "What do I want?" The outlaw's laugh was harsh. "I want the 2 years of my life back that I spent in jail because of your wife's testimony. I want my brother and cousins alive again instead of shot down like dogs. I want justice." "The only justice here is that you were caught and convicted for your crimes," Penelope said with quiet dignity, despite her fear. "You killed my first husband in cold blood, and now your second one gets to watch you die," Blackwell snarled, cocking the revolver. In that instant, several things happened simultaneously. Hannah, sensing the danger to her mother, threw herself forward with a wail. Xander lunged toward Blackwell, drawing his knife, and from the open window behind the outlaw came the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. "Drop it, Blackwell," came Sheriff Blackwood's steady voice. "You're surrounded." Blackwell hesitated, his eyes darting between Xander, now poised to throw his knife, and the window where the sheriff's rifle barrel was visible. "One way or another, you're not leaving here alive if you harm them," Blackwood continued. "Your choice how this ends." For a moment, it seemed the outlaw might choose violence regardless of consequence. Then, with a curse, he lowered his weapon. "Kick it away," Xander commanded, knife still raised. Blackwell complied, sending the revolver skittering across the floor. The moment it was out of reach, deputies burst through the door, tackling Blackwell to the ground and binding his hands. "You folks all right?" Sheriff Blackwood asked, entering once Blackwell was secured. Penelope nodded, clutching James to her chest while reaching for Hannah with her free arm. "How did you know?" "Routine patrols spotted suspicious tracks heading this way," the sheriff explained. "When we realized it might be Blackwell, we followed quietly." He looked at the outlaw with disgust. "He won't escape again. Federal marshals are waiting in Helena to take him to a maximum security prison in the east." After the lawmen departed with their prisoner, Xander gathered his family close, his heart still racing from the close call. "I should have been in the house," he berated himself. "Should have been protecting you. You can't be everywhere at once," Penelope soothed. "And we're safe now." Truly safe. That evening, after both children were asleep, Xander and Penelope sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. The events of the day had left them shaken but also profoundly grateful for what they hadn't lost. "I've been thinking," Penelope said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "about how quickly life can change, how precious each moment is." Xander nodded, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I know what you mean, seeing Blackwell in our home, threatening you and the children." He shuddered. "I've never been so terrified. It made me realize something," she continued. "I've been holding back a part of myself, afraid to fully embrace this new life we've built, as if loving you completely somehow diminished what I had with Thomas." "Penelope, let me finish," she said gently. "Today showed me that life is too uncertain to hold anything in reserve. I love you, Xavier Cole, with all my heart. Not as a replacement for what I lost, but as the gift. You are the man who saved me, who loves my daughter as his own, who gave me our beautiful son." Xander turned to face her, cupping her cheek in his calloused palm. "I've felt the same way," he admitted. "Like I was betraying Sarah and my first James by being happy again. But today, when I thought I might lose you and our children," his voice broke. "I realized they would want this for me, this second chance, this love." Penelope leaned into his touch, "So no more holding back. No more ghosts between us." "No more," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and endless possibilities. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Cole family. The farm prospered, with Xander's blacksmithing skills in high demand throughout the region and Penelope's garden expanding into a small but productive orchard. Hannah grew into a spirited, intelligent girl with her mother's compassion and her stepfather's quiet strength. James, robust despite his early arrival, displayed a natural affinity for horses and spent every possible moment at Xander's side. In the spring of 1882, they welcomed another addition, a daughter they named Ruth Sarah, in honor of their dear friend and Xander's first wife. The following year brought twin boys, Samuel and Stephen, completing their family and filling the expanded homestead with laughter and activity. As Montana territory grew and changed, so did the Coles. Helena expanded, bringing more opportunities and connections. The railroad reached the region, making travel easier and opening new markets for Xander's metalwork. Penelope established a small school on their property for their children and those of neighboring homesteaders, combining her love of teaching with her dedication to family. On a warm summer evening in 1888, 10 years after Xander had found Penelope collapsed on his porch, the family gathered around a bonfire to celebrate Hannah's 10th birthday. Now a lanky girl with her mother's blue eyes and a confidence born of being deeply loved, Hannah sat between her parents, watching her younger siblings chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Tell the story, Pa," 9-year-old James requested, flopping down beside them with the casual grace of a young colt. "The one about how you and Ma met." The younger children quickly abandoned their game to join the circle, knowing this beloved family tale. "Well," Xander began, his voice deepening as it always did when he told stories, "it was a stormy spring night, much like the one when you were born, James. I was alone in my cabin, believing that's how I'd always be, when fate left a very special delivery on my doorstep. That was me." Hannah interjected proudly. "Not yet," Penelope corrected with a smile. "You were still safely tucked inside me, but very eager to meet the world." Xander continued, describing how he'd delivered Hannah by firelight, how tiny and perfect she'd been, how fiercely protective he'd felt of both mother and child from that first moment. The children listened raptly, though they'd heard the tale countless times before. And then what happened? 6-year-old Ruth prompted when he paused. "Then we had to leave the cabin to go to Helena," Xander explained. "So your mother could help catch some very bad men who had hurt her first husband. And you were sad when Ma and Hannah left," 5-year-old Samuel said solemnly. "So sad that you had to go find them again," Stephen added, his twin nodding in agreement. Xander smiled, meeting Penelope's eyes over the children's heads. "That's right. I tried to let them go, thinking they'd be better off without a broken old cowboy like me, but my heart knew better." "And then you got shot," James exclaimed with the enthusiasm only a boy could have for such details. "James," Penelope admonished gently, "that wasn't the important part." "No," Xander agreed, taking her hand in his. "The important part came after, when your mother nursed me back to health and agreed to be my wife, when we decided to become a real family." "And you said the best thing ever," Hannah prompted, her eyes shining in the firelight. Xander's gaze held Penelope's, the love between them as strong and steady as the day they'd wed. "I'll raise them right beside you," he quoted softly, just as he had that night by the fire in Helena. "And that's exactly what we've done." Later, after the children were asleep, and the older ones reading quietly in their rooms, Xander and Penelope stood on the porch of their home, arms around each other as they gazed at the star-filled Montana sky. "Do you ever wonder how differently things might have turned out?" Penelope asked. "If the stagecoach hadn't been robbed, if I hadn't collapsed at your cabin." "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at our children, at the life we've built together, and I can't imagine wanting any other path." She turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming to rest on his chest where the scar from Blackwell's bullet remained as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. "Every step, every hardship led us here, to each other, to this family. And I wouldn't change a single one," Xander said, bending to kiss her with the tenderness of a man who knew the true value of love found, lost, and found again. "Not one moment of the journey that brought me to you." As they stood together under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the home they'd built and the family they'd created, Penelope and Xavier Cole embraced the fullness of their shared life, a testament to the healing power of love and the enduring strength of promises kept beside a flickering fire.